Hi everyone, today Peter talks to us about how we deal with the authorities. Dear friends, I urge you as immigrants and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the nations that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Submit yourselves, for the Lord's sake, to every human authority, whether to the emperor as a supreme authority or to governors who are sent by the emperor to punish those who do wrong and commend those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. Live as free people, but don't use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God. Honor the emperor. So we're talking about church and state and faith and politics, everybody's favorite topics that never get anybody in trouble when they speak on them. It's really a question, though, of how do we keep our priorities straight? And how do we make sense of what Peter's talking about in our day and age? Because Peter is writing to a religious minority in the Roman Empire. They are not members of the majority dominant religion in a democratic nation like we are. So Peter's main encouragement is to live differently, right? That we don't give in to these sinful desires here, which he doesn't spell out, but in the context probably means to do things the way the empire does, to fight back against them the way they would fight us. Our peaceful, loving way of life, that's our witness. Not what we say really, but how we live. That ultimately others' response to looking at us should be, I don't agree with those Christians, but they are doing a lot of good for people. Often, unfortunately, it's the opposite, right? These Christians are no different from anybody else. They're just seeking power for their own interests, like everybody else does. So Peter here calls for submission rather than rebellion. And we'll talk more about the submission idea later this week, but I kind of wonder what he's really fully getting at. Is it they're a little bit tongue-in-cheek about emperors and governors? They only punish wrongdoers and they commend people who do right. I mean, it's these same Roman authorities that crucify Peter not long after he writes this letter. He's not naive to the evils of Rome. Now, ideally, I think what he's referring to is that there should be some authority to keep the peace. But even when they fall short, as they often do, we as followers of Christ are still called to peace. He also says to give everyone their due and nothing more, I think. Right? Rulers deserve some honor and respect, but they don't deserve the reverence that is due only to God. So where are our priorities on this? When do we get those things mixed up? When do we expect worldly saviors when they're just going to make things worse? So how are you using your freedom? We have more freedoms today than Peter possibly could have imagined. But do we think of those freedoms and rights as ways to be selfish, right? I get to do what I want. You can't tell me what I need to do for the sake of some other person. Or do we use them in a way that's selfless? To think, how can I choose and encourage the authorities to do whatever they can, whatever I can, to lift up the least of these? That's the way of Christ in this world.